Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Clackamas County Board of Commissioners Issues and Updates and Policy Session on November 13, 2024. Administrator Gary Schmidt, you're up first.
Thank you, Chair Smith. We're starting with issues and updates today for one item. Commissioner West is online. Commissioner West, are you there?
I am.
Thank you. And Commissioner Schrader is on her way but is delayed at the moment. The one item for issues this morning is Oregon Housing Needs Analysis Draft Comment Letter. You have a draft in your packet. You reviewed this last week. This is coming back for further edits. Dan Johnson, Director of Transportation and Development. Go ahead, please.
Thank you so much, Chair Smith, Commissioners. As you recall, we shared this draft with you last week. Commissioner Savas had some questions or some desires to kind of beef up some of the language around a couple different things, one of which was the infrastructure, and the timing and the financing, and some of the nuances to some of the counties when talking about the availability of those services and the availability to bring lands in and things of that nature. So if you look on page 3 of the report, or of the letter, pardon me, we added a paragraph or bolstered a paragraph there, second paragraph down, basically highlighting the fact that further complicating the discussion about county peer groups are the traits inherent to these communities: topography, natural resources, and availability of land. Infrastructure availability, such as transportation, sewer, and water, and differing finance tools available to fund supporting infrastructure to realize the desired housing densities. These issues complicate balancing peer-based comparisons between these communities. So essentially, if you have any comments, we can revise it as such, but those were the additions that we made in light of the comments that Commissioner Savas had.
Great. Commissioners, do you have questions or comments regarding the letter?
Appreciate the changes.
Yeah, we appreciate the changes. Commissioner West, do you have a comment?
You're on mute, Commissioner, if you're speaking.
I do not have any comments. I appreciate the changes also.
Thank you, Commissioner West. Gary, do we need a motion?
Yes, please.
I'll accept a motion.
Move to approve the letter as drafted.
Seconded.
Commissioner Savas has moved to approve the needs letter. What's the title of it?
Oregon Housing Needs Analysis
Oregon
Comments.
Housing Needs Analysis, and Commissioner Scholl has seconded the motion. Further discussion? Seeing none, would the clerk please take the poll?
Commissioner West.
Aye.
Commissioner Scholl.
Aye.
Commissioner Savas.
Aye.
Madam Chair.
Aye. Motion passes 4-0. Thank you very much, Dan.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Now we'll move to the first policy session. Chair, would you please convene as the Housing Authority of Clackamas County?
I will recess as the Board of County Commissioners and convene as the Housing Authority of Clackamas County.
You're now meeting as the Housing Authority of Clackamas County. This policy session is Clackamas Heights redevelopment and Hillside Park redevelopment concept endorsements. Commissioner Schrader is now joining the meeting. Commissioner Leenstra is not online, so it'll just be you today, Commissioners. Presenting today is Adam Brown, Deputy Director of Health, Housing, Human Services, and Devin Ellen, Housing Development Director for the Housing Authority.
Welcome.
Go ahead, please.
Good morning, Chair Smith, Commissioners. Adam Brown, Deputy Director, Health, Housing, and Human Services.
Hi, Devin Ellen, Housing Development Director with the Housing Authority.
And we appreciate the opportunity to be here with you this morning. We're seeking concept endorsement for a preliminary award of regional affordable housing bond funds to Clackamas Heights redevelopment and Buildings D and E of the Hillside Park redevelopment. As you know, this is a step that is required before we officially submit to Metro for approval to utilize bond funds, and in this case, our remaining affordable housing bond funds, to our development project. So, you know, we've been working hard on the Clackamas Heights master plan, and we're, you know, we've got construction underway on the first phase of Hillside Park, so this is related to the second phase, and I'm going to let Devin take it from here.
Good morning, Commissioners. So I'm here to preview the two projects that Adam just described. Approval of these two projects will add 245 bond-funded units to the pipeline, resulting in the county's production of a total of 1,215 bond-funded units, exceeding Clackamas County's housing bond production goal of 812 units by 150%. So first up, we have the Clackamas Heights redevelopment. This project will transform the 16-acre, 100-unit World War II-era public housing complex into a revitalized community with up to 225 affordable homes, with new roads and infrastructure, mature trees, walking trails, playgrounds, green spaces, and a variety of community amenities. The Housing Authority plans to reposition and redevelop Clackamas Heights through the Section 18 disposition program. In late June, we submitted a Section 18 application to HUD, seeking approval to convert the property from public housing to Section 8. And in late October, we received approval from HUD. And we've applied for the Section 8 tenant protection vouchers, and we expect to receive approval by the end of the year. So this regional affordable housing bond provides the authority a really unique opportunity to utilize its existing public housing to leverage public and private resources to increase affordable housing opportunities in Clackamas County, and is outlined in Clackamas County's Metro Affordable Housing Bond Local Implementation Strategy, or LAS. HAC set aside roughly half of its bond revenues to reposition its public housing. So we're moving forward with that. And so we applied for and were awarded a planning and development grant for $375K from Metro. And that helped us develop an initial concept plan and engage the community around the plan. And we plan to redevelop the site now with 225 units of cluster housing. So we're utilizing Oregon City's recently adopted cottage cluster zoning. And this concept plan aims to make more efficient use of the site while supporting each household's independence and privacy. This is a pretty innovative type of density that received a lot of support from residents and the neighbors during the engagement phase. Oregon City's cluster zoning permits the development of up to 12 homes clustered around a common green space. This allows for more efficient land use and housing density that feels more like single-family living, but will accommodate a growing population facing rising housing costs. Clackamas Heights will be comprised of 18 to 20 cottage clusters, each containing 12 units arranged around the shared courtyard. And the dwellings themselves will be attached structures, so townhomes, duplexes, 3 and 4plexes. And each cluster will have its own space with shared amenities like mail and laundry. The Housing Authority recently selected Trubeck Construction as general contractor, and the design team, along with Bora Architecture, is working together on programming and schematic design. We're exploring innovative building concepts like modular housing, where the houses are built off-site and then we bring them in and they're assembled on site. And this is in order to reduce construction timelines and building costs. The Housing Authority plans to use the requested $15 million in regional housing bond funds to leverage other sources, including state, local innovation, and fast track or LIFT funds, the low income housing tax credit equity, private activity bonds, county home funds, and disposition proceeds. We'll also have a permanent mortgage on the property. So I'll pause here to answer any questions and before I move on to the next project.
Thank you for this. This is so many years in the making. When I was a commissioner last time around that we approached this idea, it must be 10 years now that we've been wanting to do this. Remember, Martha?
Yeah.
And when, we talked about it and I brought it forward 10 years ago, it was like so controversial. How dare you? How dare you take away our low-income housing? I says, no, we can magnify it by so much more. Imagine, if you will, if we would have done it years ago. The cost would have been a quarter of what it is now. But if we don't do it now, it's only going to get more expensive. So I really want to thank you for your work. Adam, you weren't even here at the county then, but you came and you made this happen. Ellen, I really thank you for all your strategic involvement in this. I'm aware of what you've been doing, and it's been great. Any other comments from commissioners? Commissioner Schrader.
I just wanted to say, yeah, it's been so long that I remember working with Chuck when he was here.
Oh, yeah, Chuck Robbins.
Chuck Robbins, yeah, and that was just preliminary, just looking at a design, but it's so nice to finally see this come to fruition. Thank you so much for all you do.
Commissioner Savas.
Yeah, I too recall almost the beginning of my first role here as a commissioner, Commissioner Ann Leininger being really on top of this as well and trying to want to get this launched and touring the site and knowing what we were trying to do. It goes to show again how long it takes to do something. People have no idea. I think it's just turning a switch, and a year later, bang, you can make things happen. And this is a demonstration of thoughtful planning, a lot of work, and again, just think about all the people along the way, yourselves included. So you're much appreciated. I'm glad we're finally at this place.
Thank you. Commissioners, on the bottom of page 7, there is a recommendation and a motion. Who would like to do that?
Go
Go ahead,
do it for
Commissioner
you.
Scholl.
I move to approve the request for concept endorsement approval to provide a preliminary commitment of $15 million in housing bond funds to the Clackamas Heights redevelopment and $5.5 million to Hillside Park Buildings D and E.
Second.
Commissioner Scholl has moved, we approve the request for concept endorsement approval to provide preliminary commitment of $15 million in housing bond funds to the Clackamas Heights redevelopment and $5.5 million to Hillside Park Buildings D and E. Commissioner Savas has seconded that motion. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, would the clerk please call the roll?
Commissioner Schrader,
Aye.
Commissioner West,
Aye.
Commissioner Savas,
Aye.
Commissioner Scholl.
Aye.
Madam Chair.
Aye. Motion passes 5-0. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Chair, would you now please reconvene as the Board of County Commissioners?
I will recess as a housing authority and reconvene as a Board of County Commissioners.
Next, Homeless Services Advisory Structure, Bylaws, and Members. Rod Cook, please come forward, Director. And Adam, are you presenting this one too?
Yeah.
All right.
He's going
Rod
to join
Cook,
us.
Director of Health, Housing, Human Services, and Adam Brown, Deputy Director. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Smith. Commissioners, Adam Brown, Deputy Director, Health, Housing, and Human Services. So we're here this morning seeking your approval to form and recruit members for the new Community Homeless Advisory Board. As you will recall, we came before you on February 7th seeking approval for a new Homeless Services Advisory Structure and to enter into a pilot contract with the Homeless Solutions Coalition of Clackamas County for advisory group convening and facilitation support. You approved of the new advisory structure, but asked that we carry out a formal solicitation for that ongoing support that we need. As you know, our homeless services system has grown significantly over the past 3 years with funding from the passage of the Supportive Housing Services Measure in 2020 and the addition of new state and federal resources. Dating back to before the SHS measures passing, Clackamas County has planned to create a more robust and inclusive advisory structure to inform the programs and services that are funded across this much larger and growing recovery-oriented system. Prior to 2020, Clackamas County received and administered approximately $8 million annually in local, state, and federal funding for homelessness programs, more than half of which was from the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development's Continuum of Care grants. With the homeless services system now funded by more than $75 million in ongoing local, state, and federal funding, we have an important responsibility to formulate and maintain a more well-informed and responsive countywide plan to ensure that homelessness in our county is rare, brief, and non-reoccurring. The approved advisory structure balances the need for high-level leadership review and recommendation with the need to ensure that the development of plans, strategies, and funding recommendations are informed by broad community input with representation from important stakeholder communities that can bring different and even competing perspectives to the table. This is consistent with both Clackamas County's Supportive Housing Services Local Implementation Plan, which commits to the formation of an inclusive decision-making body, as well as with the HUD COC requirement that the membership of local boards ensure a community-wide commitment to ending and preventing homelessness and represent relevant organizations within the geographic area to fulfill that commitment. To strike this balance, the approved advisory structure has two primary bodies. The first is a leadership level committee, the Community Homelessness Advisory Board, which we propose to be added as part of the county's advisory boards and commissions program. The second is a larger community advisory group, the Housing Services Advisory Group, that will represent the breadth of local communities and organizations concerned with homelessness and housing issues. There's a visual of this in your packet today that shows this two-tiered structure. The next step in the process is to officially form these groups and recruit for members. Forming the new ABC requires formal board approval, so that's what we're seeking here today. We've drafted a set of bylaws, which we can go through together, and we're seeking your input on key considerations before moving the bylaws forward for county council review and your formal adoption at a later date. That's the prepared comments we have, so we're happy to take questions or dialogue.
Commissioners, on page 9 of your packet is a graph that Adam referred to about the structure. And so what you have done, Adam, is you've identified the needs, and then we will try to find people, or maybe already have found people that fit the needs, correct?
That's correct.
Okay,
Yep.
thank you. Commissioner Savas.
I'm just going to talk about an unrelated matter, and just to make a point. I was recently appointed to a committee from ODOT, and yesterday I got my orientation packet, and I was quite robust. I was actually very impressed. It was probably the most impressive orientation welcome to a committee I've ever seen. Matter of fact, I'm going to try to use it as a model. In that it really has some explicit language about conflicts of interest, when we have members that are sitting on a committee, and procedures for declaring that or disqualifying a member for being on that. So if I heard you correctly, Adam, what you said is that the bylaws will come back to us?
That's right, Commissioner. So PGA has a formal process for forming advisory boards and commissions, and the first step is formal board approval. Now, on February 7th, when we came to you before, you all expressed interest in seeing a draft set of bylaws, so we wanted to come prepared with that today as a starting point, solicit feedback on it, before we take that next step in the process that PGA has outlined, which is the actual recruitment of members and finalization of the bylaws.
Okay, what I would like, as one person sitting up here at the dais, I would like to see some, and maybe there's another place for it, but it seems the bylaws would be the appropriate place, some language regarding potential or actual conflicts of interest and how that will be dealt with. I think that with all the money that has been appropriated, in this particular say world, but matter. I'm concerned that some of the people that have a lot of experience, and nothing bad about that, but at the same token, there ought to be some kind of arm's length in some cases for being a member of a board, have a vote, and also perhaps being a recipient, whoever that may be. And the list of the names that I saw here, you got names already. Is that a pool, or has those already been pre-selected?
So, Commissioner, good question. So the list of names is in reference to our Housing Services Advisory Group. So that's a department level advisory group that fulfills our responsibilities related to things like the continuum of care, to have a steering committee, et cetera. That's separate from the board-approved advisory boards and commissions, the Homeless Advisory Board. So what the department intends to do with regard to that broader group is, as if you might recall, as part of the governor's emergency order, we were required to form what the governor referred to as a multi-agency coordination group, a MAC group. We did that last spring, and that has been a really, really constructive and successful group of folks. And so what we intend to do is transition them actually from being Clackamas County's MAC group and just that state funding compliance responsibility to become our Homeless Services Advisory Group and then subsume those MAC group responsibilities under the purview of that group, similar to the COC Steering Committee responsibilities. Now, we will also then look at the roster of those folks and decide who else do we need at this table now that we're officially forming this department level advisory group. But that's separate from the ABC, that will be a formal recruitment consistent with the county's ABC process. And we don't yet have names of folks identified. I think, we've heard certain names of folks we think will provide good leadership level value to the county, but we haven't contemplated specific names yet. That will come as part of the recruitment process.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Scholl.
Yes, good morning. Okay, on the Community Homeless Advisory Board, you selected 10 different types of people that you want on there, okay? And on the Housing Services Advisory Group, you've got 16 different types of people identified with 4 to be determined, okay? Now, and below that, you've got the Lived Experience Council and the Continuum of Care Work Group. How are they going to interact? Because those are separate entities.
Correct. Those are subgroups of the Homeless Services Advisory Group. So the TBD boxes were not, and the 16 plus the 4 is not intended to suggest that there will be 20 or there has to be 20 in that group, that lower group. The ABC is more formal, right? You have bylaws, you have a certain set of members. The Homeless Advisory Group is not intended to be as structured, and the TBDs are reflective of our desire to make sure we have the right people at the table. We've heard from the board, we want good addictions and recovery insight. We want business community insight, law enforcement, et cetera, at that table. So that group will be a little bit more organic, and we have flexibility to operate it in that way as a department. But the ABC is a more formal board approved with bylaws that outlines distinctly the number of members and the specific qualities of individuals.
And will the Housing Services Advisory Group essentially report to the Community Homeless Advisory Board? Is it a subordinate relationship to the Housing Board, or is it?
It's not a subordinate relationship. It's largely intended to fulfill those sort of program compliance responsibilities we have to convene and seek community input. Now, certainly there's value in both, and I would expect that the Community Homeless Advisory Board will seek input and recommendations from that other table. That's how we've envisioned it functioning, but it's not subordinate, although we do expect the ABC group could make requests of the advisory group.
Okay, I understand. Thank you.
Thank you. And there's a footnote at the advisory group. It says fulfills HUD continuum of care governance requirements. So this is kind of fulfilling many needs in one document or one appointment, or I'm not sure if I'm saying that right.
You're absolutely right, Chair. We have program compliance responsibilities around convening and seeking community input, both with the COC and HUD governance, but also the MAC group, for example, right? It fulfills that role as well. Had we formed this before the MAC group requirement, we would have told the governor, check, we already have this advisory group, they're going to be our MAC group, but we're doing it the other way around.
Okay. Commissioner Schrader?
Yeah, one of the things I wanted to mention, colleagues, I know you folks already know this, that Commissioner Savis and I went down and visited the Lane County model, and they were so successful in what they were doing because the new ABC, the function that they had was really bringing in external folks from the larger community who would essentially be champions. So when we wanted to do a housing project, we had the business community on board. So they were kind of like more community liaisons. And of course, then they have to have the continuum of care piece, which seems to be more of the providers as well that need to be delivering these services. So it should be, if we implement this the way Lane County has implemented it and looked at their successes, I think this is going to go a long way to getting broad community support. As you know, sometimes we get pushback from people. So I see this homelessness advisory board as those folks who are those leaders in the day-to-day community that can help us get there. So, but thank you for that. And Paul, you remember visiting, yeah.
Excuse me. I have a question for Jane, our county counsel, regarding conflicts of interest. Now, there's been a lot of bylaws that have been rewritten throughout the county for our ABCs, and I would think that would be a given, but maybe it's not. Can you talk to me about conflicts of interest?
So conflicts of interest are actually governed under that.
Can you speak up, ma'am?
ORS, I think it's ORS 244, which is, I think, Oregon ethics law. I do see a reference in the bylaws to the public meetings law, but to Commissioner Savis's and your point, Chair Smith, we could add something that says that these should be subject to the ethics laws as well. And then the Oregon Ethics Commission just came out with some new rules that do require training for advisory groups that my office should be rolling out in the coming year, so that all these advisory group members would be trained on the ethics under and conflicts of interest and how to recuse yourself and all of that under ORS 244 and these new rules.
So you recommend a little bit of wordsmithing before we approve the bylaws?
I don't think it would hurt to put a reference to 244 in there.
Okay. All right. Commissioner, is it Commissioner West online?
No, it's me.
Gary?
So we already do this. We have a document any new advisory board member signs at Clackamas County that states various things about following a code of conduct, and it includes identifying a conflict of interest if you have one. So we do that for a new member. It's not in the bylaws per se, but that is any new member of an ABC at Clackamas County signs that document.
Okay. Are we satisfied, Jane?
I think that's good. That certainly, I think that matches with my experience in other counties.
Okay, all righty. I don't want to delay stuff endlessly, because if we keep delaying, we're going to be piled up on the last couple of weeks of this session. Commissioner Savis?
Yeah, I'm hoping to actually be more explicit. I mean, making a reference to that statute would be good, I think valid, but I think having it be more explicit so that any new member or anyone who forgot what the procedure is during a meeting, for example. Let's just say something comes up during a meeting. If you're the chair, you're going to want to look at the language in the bylaws because you're running the meeting based on that. Same with staff. So I would argue or ask that we consider having some more explicit language that kind of defines that. I'm happy to share what I saw yesterday, for example. I think it'd be valuable. So that said, I have a question, and that my question to you all is that, give me an example. For example, when we looked at the site where we are potentially going to put a recovery center over there in Clackamas off of Old 82nd Drive in that area, how would this group be involved in that?
What is the location, Paul?
The old Clackamas school where we're going to put the recovery center. In hindsight, how would we engage? How would this group be engaged in that, for example?
Well, I can think of a number of ways, Commissioner, but I think one of the most relevant one is helping to understand the need, right? We've talked a lot about what is it we're trying to accomplish at this recovery campus. So how do we understand the challenges and barriers people experiencing homelessness have? What do we think the unmet need is that exists in the community? What are the stresses and pressures that our homeless services providers are facing? I can tell you one of them is that they feel like the failings of a lot of systems are cascading down on their shoulders and they're not equipped to deal with it. So I think providing that expertise on how the recovery campus can be plugged into the homeless services system and vice versa to achieve the community goals that we have for recovery and our recovery-oriented system of care. We also are going to have law enforcement partners. We already do, right? Our Deputy District Attorney Bill Stewart, Lieutenant Mendoza, they've been part of our MAC group, bringing really valuable insight. So I think that tension that our law enforcement partners feel dealing with some of the day-to-day impacts on the street. So I think just elevating all those concerns and making sure that they're informing the program design. So that's kind of on the front end, but then also on the back end, right? How are we problem solving together? That's another area where the MAC group has been really, really successful, is there are tensions that come up around our programs, and how do we work together to address those tensions? So this is complementary to helping achieve the programmatic goals at, whether it's Stabilization Center, the Carrying Place downtown Oregon City, or this site. It's an integral part of that.
Okay.
And
Well,
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I might add that from a PGA perspective, this is the community engagement. So this formalizes the community engagement that we all seek. And so it gives you a broader net and a formalized net to hear concerns, get input on programming, get input on with the neighborhood. So that, I think what this does, it formalizes that process that we all have been wanting more of as we've been citing some of these new facilities.
So don't get me wrong, I really want to see this happen, but I want to give you some examples. I guess maybe I've been around too long, but you see where things work and sometimes where things backfire. So most all these people, from my example here, are gone. So this is not anything, I'm not going to mention any names anyhow, but there was a matter that came before us, and the NIMBYism issue came up. And we had someone who was one of our committee members who aggressively felt that, basically to the public, too bad, so sad, and turned off a lot of people, this particular person, including a couple members of the board, and felt that the board should just do this without much public process, right? And, doing all the things it takes to, get a neighborhood agreement and smooth out all those things and messaging and all that. So that's why I'm, knowing how difficult it is to cite issues for this population is the biggest challenge we've had, frankly, has been the NIMBYism. So therefore, the sensitivities around that and their involvement, I'm not saying they would be a detriment. I'll say is that even members of the board could be a detriment to that. So it goes both ways, right? So you can say something or do something that can, but all I'm saying is that I just want to understand how we best become partners and work together in a sophisticated fashion to avoid those particular situations. And so sometimes people are really good at knowing how to treat their population, and you list all of that, but they may not be so good at how to deal with the NIMBYism, right? That's a skill set that I'm not sure who has that.
Yeah, and I think some of this comes down to our organizational value orientation. I think we've come a long way. Now, I don't think I was around for some of this stuff, but I can tell you that I really believe that the criticism and dissent and difference of opinion makes us better. It makes us more responsive. And so I cherish that. I want that to be part of these groups that, I think we do have to be resilient to some amount of criticism, right? And try to charge ahead for the sake of getting stuff done. So we do always have to have some aspect of that. We're not going to be able to solve for all of the NIMBY concerns, but I don't want it to be dismissive. That's not going to work. Dismissive doesn't work. It's help us understand your concerns and how can we fold those concerns into the way we design and operate our programs to be responsive to them. That has to be part of our organizational value system. It is today, and I think that's part of our success, frankly.
Right. Well, I think maybe, I know, not maybe. Gary's had being the former director of PGA, he's had some experience. There's sometimes where either the committee itself has some scope creep or individual members of the committee decide to, I won't say throw their weight around, but I'm not talking about anyone in particular here. So it's those kinds of things. I just don't know if there's a way to craft the bylaws to make sure that, some kind of guidance as to whether, not only behaviors, but just that there's some order, right? There's respect and order and acknowledging. And so mission creep or scope creep or someone individually saying, I'm a member of this committee, so therefore, I have the authority and walk into a room or a business and say, shame on you or whatnot. I mean, that can be caustic.
Yeah, I two things. I think Gary alluded to the form that we have new members sign. I mean, really taking our time to, train to that form, because that's what it tried to get at some conduct issues that I was heading up as a department or a division. I was heading up the equity committee back in the day. And we always talked, our education to that group was, you cannot go off on your own. You do not represent the group. You represent yourself. And if you ever show up, that's how you have to let the board or whomever you're talking to know about that. So we trained on that. And then we also said, this board is about partnership. So if you come in with an arm twisting model, that's not, so we trained to that, like, here's how you're going to be successful with this board if you want anything to go forward. So that's the part that the department's doing behind the scenes or behind the curtain, as it were, to get their members to act appropriately. And I like the conflict of interest piece wherever it shows up in our documents, to say to people, if you have a personal, you need to step out of that whole decision-making process and maybe even the deliberations at some point. So I think it's we have some things in play. And understanding, your concerns and what you're bringing forward, I think we can train to a lot of this.
Yep. And my last point is, I see that you're talking here in the bylaws about votes versus consensus. And I'm not here to sway that one way or another, but I do want to say it needs to be almost explicitly clear that the role of the committee or a decision or a recommendation is either by vote or consensus and not of an individual. So that, they know they need to work together to give a clear advice, not a vote to enact, but a vote to advise. And as long as that's explicit.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Scholl.
Okay, so many of our ABC bylaws do not refer to ORS 244. And so as long as we continue to ensure that as the department and the board interviews new potential nominees to ABCs, that the new member conflict of interest declaration continues to be signed before it comes to the board for confirmation of those recommendations. I think that's been working, and I think that'd be quite adequate, as long as we all remember that there's that check valve on the declaration conflict of interest form before it comes to the board for approval. And that should be fine. So with that, I think your bylaws look good.
Thank you. I think we're fine, too. I think we're covered legally. Gary?
Commissioner West would like to speak.
Commissioner West, you're up.
Thank you, Chair. I share everyone's similar concerns, and Rod, thank you for the explanation about how you advise and train the members to be an advisory board to us and to not bring maybe their own agenda in a way that isn't collaborative. I also think it's important that this group is trained on what a recovery-oriented system of care is. We've been very intentional with the worldview and the philosophy that is informing the work that we do. And we also see a lot of maybe policies and different philosophies in the region that we don't really think are the best way to go about this, especially in Clackamas County. So I think them having an understanding about how we look at this and the scope in which we're doing that is essential. And so they're giving us advice. They're doing it through a philosophy and a worldview that we share in common, and maybe looks something more like Clackamas County than just like Multnomah County. So that's kind of my concern, is them having an understanding about who we are and how we operate.
Yeah, great points. I think in your recruitment documents, you might have something there. The board who's liaison to this group, if you choose to do that as a board, I think that's in these documents. That's an opportunity. That's where you can have some influences there. And then overall, again, what we, as a department, what we'd be training those committee members to is exactly what you're talking about, Commissioner.
Okay. Any further comments?
Yeah, so under Article 2, under Article 2, under goals, I'm looking at F in particular. But there again, I sometimes wonder if the goals are actually roles. So the words, is it a role or is it a goal? And then in particular, to my earlier comment, F gives me a little bit of pause, again, to that earlier issue about direct communication with the public, absent action or approval. Again, advising themselves or advising the board. Does the board pre-approve? Just asking, if you were to exercise this, how would it actually functionally, mechanically work? Would the board say, yes, go and do it, or would the advisory board simply go do it?
The advisory board should not operate outside of the department, for one, but two, definitely not the board. And so they're advisory to you. You appointed them. They need to come to you for any real action out in community, right? So they should not be acting independently of the county system, whether that be department and the Board of County Commissioners.
All right, so as I look under goals, A through F, and I'll just read F out loud so that you understand. So what would be the procedure in which that would be authorized, and then who would do it? And I'll read it. It says, may conduct outreach to the public to gather feedback on issues of homelessness as directed by the staff or board. And the last part is pretty clear, right, as far as, directed by the staff or the board, but which one is it?
It's directed by the staff and the board. So it'd be like we just went with the Recovery Center. We went to the community, and our consultant, Cindy Becker, kind of led that effort. So this committee might have led the effort. They'll be there, but it's going to be in the context of how PGA, how the department, and how the board wants that event to occur. So that's how you control what the event is, and it won't be a willy-nilly, people just going off and thinking they can create a forum or show up somewhere and have that conversation.
So should the word or be changed to and?
You're on F? I
Yeah.
don't see-
It says by staff or the board, and I would say, should it be by staff and the board? So they're not advising, if it says or, then they're not advising to the board, they're advising to the staff if they so choose to use that lever, right?
Yeah,
I
I'm
think
just
it
envisioning like an order of operations here. So I can envision a scenario where the board, we're up here at a policy session, the board directs us, hey, work with your Homeless Services Advisory Board to convene the public for, to gather their feedback on this thing. So that's the board through us. I think or would make room for the department independently deciding that there needs to be some kind of public engagement. So to me, there's a question of whether, how comfortable is the board with that? The department at its discretion directing this group to engage the public in one thing or another. To me, that's kind of what it comes down to.
Yeah, and again, just too many experiences from the communicating with NIMBYism and so forth, and how strategically that's done when you touch the public on a matter in this realm. That's where things can yet be. I think you got to learn to be very strategic on how it's done, and not trying to dismiss the experience of staff, but also, these are unknown people on this committee as well that could be doing that. I'm not sure they have the skill sets to do that, right? So it seems to me that approach, that's a key juncture in which I think the board should be aware at the very minimum before that's really done. So that's why I suggest changing that word or to end.
Thank you. Commissioner Scholl?
Okay, so yeah, on paragraph F under goals, I kind of look at it a little bit differently, in that the Board of Commissioners could, in some cases, have an issue that they want to direct the ABC to take action on. But that's going to be done through your department. I don't know of any situation where the Board of Commissioners would direct directly an ABC without that ABC getting direction from its parent department. Okay, so, but the word "or" in that case, if you look at it from that perspective, the word "or" is actually more, what's the word I'm looking for? Less restrictive. In other words, the department could direct the ABC to look into something or conduct a meeting without having to come to the board to hear about what you feel is a need for a meeting for that ABC to engage in. So I think maybe the wording, depending how you look at it, the wording actually could be more appropriate as it is.
Gary?
A suggestion, 2F, removed by staff. So it's as directed by the board. Staff always implements your direction. So you direct the work, staff will implement it.
So this is the Board of Commissioners?
Board of Commissioners.
Can we make that clear in parentheses, parents, BCC?
Board of Commissioners.
Okay, what was that again, Gary?
So 2F would read, may conduct outreach to the public to gather feedback on issues of homelessness as directed by the Board of County Commissioners.
Okay, that's good enough.
Yep, that
I
gets it.
don't have a problem with
I
that.
don't have a problem with that either,
That's
yeah.
clear. Commissioner Savas, do you have your light on?
Oh, I did.
Okay, I'll entertain a motion.
Okay, I move to approve the Community Homeless Advisory Board bylaws and direct staff to begin recruitment of members of appointment with the modification of goals, subparagraph F, to include the words Board of Commissioners, period.
I'll second that.
Commissioner Scholl has moved we approve the Community Homeless Advisory Board bylaws and direct staff to begin recruitment on members for appointment with the modified changes in paragraph F in section 2. And Commissioner Schrader has seconded that motion. Is that clear?
Yes.
Okay, thank
Yes.
you. Any further discussion?
Yes, we also talked about strengthening the language with regards to conflicts of interest. Could that be a friendly amendment as well? I think we already had consensus on that.
I think we had consensus on the fact that it was covered in the supplemental agreement that each person signs. I think that's what the consensus was, if I heard that right. Correct, Gary?
That's what I heard, yes.
Yeah.
Well, I was hoping that we would strengthen that explicitly. That way, again, when people look at the bylaws, they're probably not going to look at the agreement they signed readily. They're going to look at the bylaws. That's what everyone falls back on when you're running a meeting. So that's why I'd like to have it more explicit in the bylaws.
We have a motion on the table. Do we amend the motion?
Would you like to make an amended motion, Commissioner?
Okay, you need
Yes,
to make,
I'd like to make a friendly amendment to be more explicit as it relates to the conflict of interest as discussed here today.
I have a question.
Commissioner Scholl has a question.
Yeah, I have a question for Commissioner Savas. How would that be worded?
I think it would emulate the section that legal counsel Veto had cited earlier.
Yes, Jane.
So, under Article 6, it's currently written, meetings of the CHAB shall be held in accordance with the Oregon Public Meetings Law. We could add, and subject to ORS 244.
I think that would be,
Do I have a second for the motion before we get too far down the? Okay. Commissioner Savas has made a friendly motion to add the language, membership subject to the rules under ORS 244, and Commissioner West has seconded the motion. Is that clear, Gary?
Yes.
Okay, so before we have further discussion, I believe we pass the amendment to the motion first,
Correct.
and then we do the original motion.
Yes.
That's already been made and seconded.
Correct, yes.
Any further discussion on the amendment regarding ORS 244? Seeing none, would you please call the poll on the amendment to the motion?
Yes, Madam Chair. Commissioner Scholl,
Aye.
Commissioner Schrader,
aye.
Commissioner Savas,
Aye.
Commissioner West.
Aye.
Madam Chair.
Aye, motion passes 5-0. Now, we will consider the motion that has been made and seconded on the table. I don't think there was any further discussion on that. If not, would the clerk please call the poll on the motion previously made?
Commissioner Savas,
Aye.
Commissioner West,
Aye.
Commissioner Schrader,
Aye.
Commissioner Scholl.
Aye.
Madam Chair.
Aye, motion passes 5-0. Thank you very much for coming forward. We look forward to the work that's going to be done on this committee.
Thank you, Commissioners. Appreciate your support.
Gary, we had a big block of time in our schedule today. I'm not sure how that happened, but nevertheless, go ahead. What's next?
So we are going to move the afternoon sessions to right now because the staff's here and we're prepared, and we always notice these meetings as approximate, not exact. So-
Commissioners, do you want to stay and continue the meeting, or do you want to come back at 1:30 this afternoon?
Let's continue to drive.
Let's
continue
continue. Okay, thank you very much for
Thank you.
accommodating the schedule.
All right, the
Gary.
next policy session is Development Ready Land Study, Part 1. Staff from Transportation and Development and the Office of Economic Development will present. Dan Johnson, the Director of Transportation and Development, and Laura Edmonds, the Manager of Economic Development. Go ahead, please.
You missed the soothing tones of my voice. You want me back so soon. Chair Smith and Commissioners, thanks for the chance to come up again today and discuss with you kind of definitely the first part of the Development Ready Land Strategy discussion that happened back in October. To be clear, the Board of County Commissioners authorized staff to move forward with this study, and an important part of this study is a discussion about the current economic condition of the county. We complete that analysis, not we, the Office of Economic Development completes that analysis through the Clackamas County Economic Landscape Analysis, known as the ELA. This is an annual report that provides an update on the current state of the county, as well as a 10-year look back to assess trends, economic trends in and around the county. So this particular report that is in your materials basically runs from 2013 to 2023. And it's important to note, especially this post-pandemic environment that we're in, this report is a look back, and so the data is 2023, most recent. So some of the things that you might be feeling or seeing in the economy may not be directly represented in this data yet. Could become more forthright in the data from 2024. Today's PowerPoint that we're going to share that's in front of you essentially are specific pages out of the ELA, and the complete ELA is attached to your materials as attachment A. So if there are questions you have about slides that we are not discussing today, please don't hesitate to reach out and we'd be glad to respond to those. A couple of things before we hop into the next slide that aren't included in the specific PowerPoint. I think it's important to highlight the fact that data suggests the fact that the county has four major employment areas. Those are essentially the Clackamas Industrial Area, East Wilsonville Industrial Area, Cruiseway, and North Milwaukee Industrial Areas. That doesn't minimize the other areas that we have, but those are four key areas around the county that are our key hubs. Secondly, the county has the 5th lowest unemployment rate. We follow Wheeler, Hood River, and Washington counties, following Wheeler, Hood River, Washington counties, and a couple of others. That's on page 8 of the report. But essentially, you can see our employment rate is low from a state perspective, which is good. And then it's good to know that while the pandemic was disruptive, the local economy has recovered quickly. So next slide, please. Oh, perfect. Thank you so much. So the first slide is around total private employment growth within Clackamas County. And I want to highlight a couple of things, one of which is this is a measure of expansion of the local economy excluding government employees. So this is all private expansion, okay? Pre-pandemic, as you can see with the numbers there, we were growing at an annual average of about 3%. There was a contradiction, as we all know, things kind of took a small pause. But what's exciting about the numbers that you see is that there was a rebound. And there was a rebound in Clackamas County to numbers that were higher than our pre-pandemic levels in 2022. So essentially, over that 10-year period, the county has, over that 10-year period, we've had a 2.1% growth, economic growth of our total private employment. And that kind of coincides with essentially a 10-year growth in our population, which the population of Clackamas County over the 10 years has grown by about 37,000, which is about a 9.8% growth in the employment itself. Next slide, please. It's important to understand where Clackamas County is in a regional perspective as well. As you can see from this slide, and this is page 5 of the ELA. From a regional perspective, the ELA shows us that in the Tri-County area, while Clackamas County has grown just over 29,000 jobs in the last decade, it's about 22% of the regional share. So we don't have the majority of the regional share, which is something to look at. All of our economic bases are different within our different counties that we have. But what's exciting to know is that our total job growth, while the total job growth is less than our neighboring counties, our annual average growth rate is higher. So we are, oh, look at that. That's impressive. Thank you, Andrew. I really appreciate that. Which essentially is, again, a discussion around some of the transitions that we're seeing around the economic state of the Tri-County area. There's shifts, there's migrations in those areas, but we are growing at a higher rate than our partners in the other Tri-County regions. Next slide, please. We're going to take a quick second on this. Essentially, we want to describe this graph in more detail. So essentially, if you look at the x-axis of the graph, the horizontal axis, essentially what that is measuring is the average annual employment change. So it's employment contraction if it's on the left side. It's employment expansion if it's on the right side, okay? If you look at the y-axis of that graph, that basically vertical line, when you are looking at areas that are, pardon me, I messed those up. When you're looking at areas that are above, it's called a regional quotient. And essentially what it's looking at is the specialization of the sectors that you have. So if they are higher on that graph, they are more regionally specific than the national average versus elements, the sectors that are lower on that graph, okay? And so you've got growth rates and you've got regional centrification is that north-south component, okay? So what does this suggest? Upper right quadrant reflects industries that have increasing employment and are more local in nature, known as emerging businesses or sectors, okay? If you are on the lower right, it reflects you are growing employment, so that's a good thing, but you are less regional in nature. If you are upper left, you are more local in nature, but they're seeing an employment reduction. And if you are in the bottom left-hand section, essentially you're seeing those areas that are seeing a reduction, have seen a reduction in employment, but are also more national. So that's where you see like retail and those kind of components. And what you can see within that is, and this is kind of that discussion around a high tide raises all boats. And so, and also the discussion around the age of the data. So essentially the focus and the efforts that we're looking at are kind of those emerging markets and where those are going and those growing markets that are increasing employment. And the question is, how do we continue to support and grow those sectors with the intent to provide essentially jobs and wage rates that then allow the citizens of Clackamas County to then increase those that are down in that bottom left sector. So for example, retail, tourism, things of that nature. So with that, there'll probably be more questions on that. I'm going to turn it over to Laura to kind of run through some specifics around kind of the major sectors that we see within Clackamas County, and then we'll go from there.
Good morning, Chair, Commissioners. Pleasure to be here.
Thank you.
So I'm going to recap real quick. So from this ELA, the Economic Landscape Analysis, the top 5 industry anchor sectors in the region have been named as food systems, health systems, advanced manufacturing, high tech, and logistics.
Excuse me, what slide deck are you reading? What number on here?
We are on, it's page 16 of your packet.
I want to scroll to page 16. Thank you, go ahead.
Of course, there you go. So the 5 industry anchor clusters that were identified, food systems, health systems, advanced manufacturing, high-tech, and logistics. So combined, they provide just over 45,000 jobs and approximately $6.13 billion to the local economy, as well as linkage to supply chain sectors that provide an additional 36,000 jobs and $3.53 billion. So the food systems alone contribute to over 5,900 jobs and about $585 million, with a secondary effect of a supply chain linkage to 3,900 jobs and about $408,000 in additional revenue for the region. I'm gonna highlight these top sectors. So on page 19, health systems, flip to that. Health systems contributes over 14,800 jobs at about $1.9 billion, with a secondary effect of supply chain linkage to another 8,500 jobs and about $883 million in added revenue. Page 22, advanced manufacturing, contributes over 8,000 jobs with $599 million, with a secondary effect of supply chain linkage to another 6,000 jobs and about $399 million in revenue. Page 25, high-tech contributes over 3,000 jobs at $735 million, with a secondary effect in supply chain linkage to over 3,800 jobs, with another $462 million in added revenue. And to the next one, logistics, page 28. Lastly, logistics contributes over 13,000 jobs to $2.3 billion, with a secondary effect of supply chain linkage to over 12,000 jobs and $1.3 billion in the revenue. So the ELA data is helpful, and we as staff will be using this to expand our targeted outreach and attraction efforts for these sectors and emerging industries that are tied to them through supply chain linkage. Targeting our attention on specific sectors should allow us to have a beneficial impact on our local economy, as well as ensuring that we are diversifying our industry clusters to support a more balanced economy to help us reach our self-sufficiency, wage, jobs, and business-friendly goals for Clackamas County. Data from this report will also inform us of industries that we need to study further to determine their site characteristics and land needs to support growing population. So in your packet is attachment C, is what I'm going to refer to next. From what we've learned from the ELA, we've determined that the next natural phase of our process would be to complete what we're going to call an industrial site and workforce readiness study. The industrial site and workforce readiness study will help us to further understand the needs of these industries, their site characteristics, and workforce needs. Such a study will help us to retain and grow businesses that we need to maintain a healthy and balanced economy for Clackamas County. The study will take into consideration such things as population and jobs forecasting, space and land requirements, as well as possible tools to support these business expansions. And we're coming before you today asking for your support in directing staff to establish the scope of work in which to perform the industrial site and workforce readiness study. And the study will be a valuable part of a more robust development-ready land study, which will be a collaborative investigation into what usable lands are available inside the UGB and our urban reserves. And that advanced study should then help to support future housing and job growth as well. So that concludes my portion of the presentation.
So just to make sure we're pulling these pieces together. So we talked about the development ready land study, which is essentially to go out and to look at lands and the development, viability of development in those particular areas, okay? How does this piece kind of fit into that? So this piece kind of fits into that by describing, these are the sectors, you have to understand who you are and who you aren't, okay? Or who you want to become. And so essentially, when we look at these sectors, this next study that we're talking about moving forward with is a better definition and desire and engagement with these sectors to analyze what their needs are to ensure that they, one, continue to be successful, or two, what is inhibiting their ability to be successful. As an example, I'll share a real-life example. Our partners at Office of Economic Development get an inquiry, I don't know, maybe it's once every 3 weeks. Hey, we're looking for 12 acres down in, the Clackamas industrial area that's undeveloped that we can site this X or Y or Z. We don't have them. Or they have yet to be developed. Or we direct them to the city of Happy Valley, who are our partners. They have some developable lands. But you see, the question is, what is that sector that you're trying to support? What are the land needs of that sector you're trying to support? And then where is the land that you need to support that? And that's how this study kind of fits into that larger discussion around a development-ready land study. We are prepared to come back, and we are still on target for a December discussion with the board around that more detailed land analysis for the scope of work. We're vetting that through our partners right now with the cities. But we wanted to share this information with you, number one, and kind of share with you kind of how they all fit together. So that's all we have for now. We'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
So based on the information here, especially the emphasis on logistics, is it safe to say that Clackamas County is an export county?
We export a lot.
We export a lot. We probably export more than we import.
One would assume that, correct?
Well, I'm not looking for an assumption. I'm looking to be able to quantify it in data.
Especially when you look at specific areas in those hubs.
Yes.
They are specifically transport-oriented.
Yes.
Industrial area is a great example, Clackamas industrial area.
Also, would you say that our food systems, meaning everything from, farm to table, is what it's affectionately called, is that what is the largest sector in Clackamas County, health systems or food systems?
Based on this, it would be, so food systems shows a total of 5,900 jobs, and health systems is 14,800 jobs.
And
over.
what is the income attached to that?
So food systems on average is it ranges from $20 to $42 an hour. And then your health systems, if it's a hospital network, it's 45 to 48.
I guess what I meant to ask, Laura, not the income attached to it, but the GDP attached to it. And I believe you mentioned it, that the food systems was over $1 billion.
And it is. So hang on, let me flip to.
Yeah,
Because a lot of that data is actually attached into this report in the other pages connected to those industries. So do you want me to go find it? Do you want me to read it for you, or do you want me to?
That's all right. I was just trying to make an emphasis on what you had previously said in your testimony.
Right, and it does spell it out. So example, on food systems, if you go to it's page 17 and 18, all of that detail is provided there, because it even so far goes to state that of the food systems, they also rely upon about 68 different goods and services, which is about a 27% consumption of local resources. So, and then the detail in value is spelled out there in the regional input with the gross output on those. It's a lot. So I don't want to eat up too much time with Q&A, but it's there because I love the question. And that's why I love this data.
The annual direct contribution to the local economy from our food systems is about $585 million. The annual contribution in our local economy from the health systems is $1.9 billion.
That's what okay.
Yeah, and that's
All right. And would you say anecdotally, what's happening in Clackamas County probably mirrors the entire state of Oregon? And you look at other counties and what they do as far as output, because Oregon is known as really an agriculture state. We have manufacturing, huge natural resource base. I'm just making this general statement. I think, one of the situations I know working with the previous governor was Oregon is not known from some big crop production like corn or wheat. We have many micro type of crops that we develop. Our nurseries, our nut industry, Christmas trees, which you can't eat, but our wineries. So there's a combination of a lot of these little, we want to say boutique farms. That's probably disrespectful since I own one, but farms that are really a microcosm of all the big food industry. Would you say that would be true, possibly? You're
Correct.
shaking your head. Yes, thank you. Okay, I'm not sure who's next. Mark Scholl?
Yes, thank you. Just to clarify, when you talk about food systems, you're talking about agriculture included?
Yeah. Food
Okay.
systems is cultivation, production,
Yeah.
processing, distribution of ag, food, and beverage
Of
products.
ag food. Okay. In Clackamas County, we have our nursery industry is approaching $1 billion, as I understand it, some 900 million plus, and growing. Okay. So I'm not sure if that's included in there. On the development ready land study, part one, I see the list of goals or actions that it's supposed to do, that it will do. But what kind of time frame are we looking at? Because all of this information is time sensitive. You know, as time goes on, things change rapidly, just like they have in the last 3 years. So what kind of time frame do you foresee for producing the part one study?
So when, in speaking to an industry expert and who produces these types of reports, so if we anticipate developing the scope of work, bringing it back to you by December 11th for review and acceptance, then the consultant informs us it's an average about 6 months to produce such a report.
I see, okay. And so
Now, let me be clear, this landscape, not for the full development land study that Dan's talked about.
okay, all right. So, well, when we look at the urban growth boundary issue and the need for larger industrial plots, this is not going to focus on that.
No, it's part of the puzzle.
Okay,
And so it's like, so when you say industrial plots, the question is, what kind of industrial plots do you need?
okay, yeah,
The sector we're looking at may need, would assume it'd need, 5 to 20 acres. Maybe our targets are bigger industrial at 60 or 70 acre lots, or size lots. Topography associated with that. Because one of the factors that we deal with, and I think it's really going to be interesting to kind of dissect this from the land study, is the fact that we are different, not only from an infrastructure discussion and a land availability discussion, it's also the type of land that we get. Our land is more difficult to develop. I'm going to be frank.
Yeah.
I mean, we've got topography, all these other different issues that we're dealing with that other regions don't. That doesn't mean that that we shouldn't have an opportunity to develop and grow. It just has to be done in a different way, a more thoughtful way. So, for example, let's go back. Metro says, you know what, congratulations, we have a 20-year land supply of all the industrial land the region needs. And they're basing that off a methodology that says that you can develop 20% sloped lands as industrial. You've seen 20% slope, I've seen 20%
Yeah.
slope. You can't develop industrial land on 20% slope. And so it's kind of, it's, as we talked about, it's that knowledge is power, and it's truing up a lot of those components.
okay. And one more question. So the part one of the study, the industrial site and workforce readiness study, now that implies it'd be a part two. Now, will a part two study, follow-on study, then be focused on implementation of what you find in the study part one? In other words, the tools you need to enhance transportation and other system development, will that be the next follow-on thing?
Yeah,
So
yes.
that you're actually working towards a tool where you can actually have a tool to actually take action to improve or assist all of our different industries that
They
you have
build on one another.
The bubble chart.
Correct, and so they build on one another. So this, again, is the discussion around the sectors and what those sectors need in regards to land and growth. That second part of it is the discussion, is the more detailed discussion
Okay.
around looking at lands within the UGB, that are zone rural, assessing our urban reserves.
Yeah.
And it's an information gathering exercise. And so it's like, hey, here are the sectors that Clackamas County is made of. Here's what they need. Here is the kind of land that we have. And so that we're able to speak from a regional voice and a regional perspective and get actual data regarding land availability, costs to develop, all those components.
Okay, good. Thank you. Well, this is excellent work. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Gary?
Commissioner West has his hand raised.
Commissioner West, you're up.
Thank you, Chair. As I look at specifically on page 11, it talks about the different industries that are contracting and that are, if you look, if I'm understanding this correctly, they're on the left side, they're contracting. As you go up the right side, they're where there's more growth opportunity. I can't help but notice that the healthcare there is lagging in Clackamas County. And I'm wondering if this information helps us see kind of a roadmap as to where focus should be or what industries are maybe struggling right now that have been kind of stalwarts within our economy. I think of healthcare as being a big one. If this helps us find a way to help bolster those industries through specific policies, but I am a little bit confused about what I'm seeing with specifically healthcare.
Agreed. And there's two things that are there, one of which, again, when we talked about in the beginning, this is 2023 data, not 2024 data. So I think that there could be some shift in that healthcare discussion. But it's also, as you can see, a very large sector within the county. And so it's how do you support that sector moving forward? And that's a deeper dive that we have to do and analyze and engage with those healthcare professionals and or industries to see how we support it.
So, quick question. Are we seeing an issue around, are they having a lack of profit? Are they not having, what is causing that such a large system of our economy to lag?
That's a really good question. We haven't done that. That's the next level of analysis to get it, really have a better understanding around the business model and the nuances around it. I think, just speaking anecdotally, I think healthcare as a whole throughout the entire state and region is struggling right now. Availability, you work in this field, but it's availability to services. How do you get services? Where are services? Cost effectiveness of services. But having said that, we are aware of some pretty significant expansions on the horizon for the healthcare industry within Clackamas County. We are having discussions with a number of large entities around significant expansions that will become more public here in the months to come.
I guess I'm concerned about things. This is a little canary in the coal mine. There are more contraction of economic industries in Clackamas County than expansion and growth. More of these bubbles are turning the wrong way than the right way. I find this quite fascinating, this whole presentation. It was very well done. This data is very important, but overall, I'm very concerned about the overall health of the economy, especially in large sectors in Clackamas. I didn't until this presentation realize what is actually maybe going on. I'm concerned about the health of our economy.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely, Commissioner Schrader.
Yeah, I just wanted to speak to the healthcare system for a moment because we were the county in the state that actually identified healthcare as a emerging sector and that it was an economic driver in our county. And it has moved forward, colleagues, that now it has been accepted at the state level as a provider of not only services to people, but the kinds of jobs. And to Ben's question, one of the results of how we helped that sector grow, we partnered with Clackamas Community College and worked with their workforce and medical team, medical technology folks, and expanded opportunities for nurses, for nursing and for technical, med techs and things of that sort. One of the key results of that was Harmony Campus over in the town center where we worked with them. I believe we even used urban renewal dollars to build that building, and that's become a hub of education for people that want to enter into the healthcare sector. So what we did as not only identified healthcare as an emerging sector, then we also, because we had that information, and then we were able to look at the workforce and also work with our partners at Clackamas Workforce Partnership and our community colleges and our educators to get a supply chain of people who want to be employed in that field. I do think it's going to continue to grow. I think the issue we just faced was a major pandemic where there was a lot of burnout and a lot of struggle, and I would expect that we'll be coming out of that and even have more. And this is what we actually do with all of the industries that we identify. We figure out what manufacturing needs, again, tie it to land. We see who are the smaller supply chain folks as well as the bigger folks, but don't forget that some of those medium to small size businesses also are supply chains for some of the larger traded sector folks. And then we haven't mentioned it yet in this report, and great report. I'm glad we finally got this done. We've had many iterations of it previously, and this is one of the best I've ever seen, so thank you for that. But I think that my point is that we haven't even touched yet about the traded sector international trade market, but that's usually the last thing that we'll look at, because first we want to get the local growth here, get the businesses started, and then we'll hopefully help them also move into traded sector international status as well. But that really isn't the purview of this. This is the snapshot that we need to really know what we already have and where we're going to go. But I had to mention the healthcare piece because we really should take a lot of pride in the fact that it was our economic development department, Dan, all you guys that pulled that together.
That blue ribbon committee that you guys.
Pardon me?
That blue ribbon committee that was put together.
Exactly. Yeah, I remember that. Yeah, that's right.
Okay, Commissioner Salas.
Yeah, a few questions here. I'm going to start from the beginning of the presentation. Dan, you mentioned the areas of the industrial areas, Clackamas Industrial, Milwaukee Industrial, so on. So put that aside for a moment. The funds for this study that we're going to be doing are coming from?
Lottery revenue.
Lottery revenue, okay.
Lottery revenue.
Okay, so what you didn't mention, my recollection, you didn't mention the industrial area in Estacada, or Canby, and the
Right.
rural. So are they included?
So the intent of that statement was not to exclude those areas. There are some of those areas that are growing extensively, City of Estacada, Canby, and others. And the intent is to, when we develop an economic analysis, that statement is around the report identifying the 5 biggest. That's all it was about,
Okay.
not to minimize the other work that's going on. But the tools that get developed can theoretically be used throughout Clackamas County. They can be used in our emerging cities down south and Estacada, Canby, and others, or they can be used in the areas of our unincorporated area in our Clackamas industrial area.
Yeah, I asked the question because contextually, from a geography area, the areas that are growing geographically, right, expanding, are the rural areas, right? Milwaukee's kind of built out, they can't go anywhere. Even our Clackamas area, except for perhaps if we get the Happy Valley area, that can be, extend that a little bit, so there's opportunity there. Canby's growing a lot, so on. So that was the context of where I want to make sure that we're looking at those.
Can I build on that for 1 second? Can I build just 1 second on that?
Sure.
That's a really good topic. I mean, there's also the discussion around the fact that there may not be a lot, you need both. You need opportunity to expand, but also the discussion here is, how do you repurpose property?
Thank you.
And is there the ability to repurpose property? And you think about lands that are already served that may have extensive asphalt, things like that. It's like, can that be rebuilt and maximized to a higher and best use that has a greater return? And that's also one of the kind of tools in the toolbox in regards to the development potential of some of those areas.
Okay. So the next place I want to go in this conversation is about one of our former colleagues on the commission had a negative look at logistics and trucks, warehousing trucks, so on, because number one, it created a lot of traffic snarls. It didn't really have a lot of jobs per acre. What's that metric you all use? Is it floor acre or not floor square footage, jobs per square footage? There was a metric there.
Well, essentially, we look at a floor area ratio,
Okay.
which is basically the amount of building area to the land area that's on any given property.
Right. And knowing that we have a scarce amount of land, we wanted to see the greatest amount of employment. So a warehouse doesn't produce a lot of jobs like in the same footprint advanced manufacturing would indeed. So the natural question I really have is, well, somewhat natural, but is that if we had, let's say, a 25-acre lot, right, and you got two folks bidding, one would be a warehouse distribution and the other one would be advanced manufacturing, we would probably want to lean on which, and then and my question is why?
I don't know there's going to be a quiz today.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, I guess,
It's more
first and
jobs,
foremost,
but-
I don't want to minimize the great logistic strengths that we have in the county, and you have to honor those, number one. Number two, I mean, when you look historically, and I take that from a perspective of when the public's got land to resell, historically, we try to look at, and I'm going to put, if you like urban renewal or not, I used to do urban renewal. That's my gig. I used to do it for a long time. There's multitudes of return on that investment. So essentially, if you look at a piece of property and the development opportunity for that piece of property, you're looking for the highest investment on that property because that investment goes back into, the tax base and the public in regards to the ability to get property tax dollars out of it. You also look at the wage rate and the number of jobs that are being created, because the jobs and the wage rate associated with that go into the state discussion, and it's opportunity. We talk about, I can never remember the term, what's the wage rate?
Self-sufficiency.
Self-sufficiency wage rate, and the ability to create self-sufficiency jobs that are there, and those are higher with some of those technical jobs, higher manufacturing jobs.
That's what I was trying to drive at was, when we look at it, what's a win for the county versus what's a win for the state, right? Because the revenue streams go differently. Lots of employees, that's great. That maybe helps us indirectly, but financially it helps the state more than it helps the county. And then what's associated with that, that's either help or hindrance to whatever the built environment is.
Real property of the building, personal property of the printing press. All those things are things that we look at on the economic return on that investment that they're making. And those are really along the same lines. A lot of the programs that the Office of Economic Development is around, if not for this, we wouldn't be able to develop this. So let's give some sort of an incentive or program that supports that to get higher, better, bigger out of some of those properties and make those pro formas work for those developers.
Right. Yeah, I just wanted to point that out, that, I know you are, but colleagues, others, people watching that we're cognizant about, what helps. And so is there any industry of these sectors that, I would say multiply or cross sectors, so where there's multiple benefit? You don't have just one sector, but it helps or feeds another sector. Is there anything, have we identified anything like that could cross relate?
Yeah, and in your report, and when you look at those sector pages, it actually talks about the correlation on the different goods and services, the number of industries that a specific sector utilizes. So I'll go to logistics. They rely on 68 different goods and services, and 61% of that is locally based. So that's the kind of data that's in these additional pages from page, 16 on. So when you look at that, that tells you how many other local institutions are using, and it also, so then that tells you what the percentage of exports are, or from other areas outside the county.
And it's that indirect they're talking about. It's the direct benefit for the business and the indirect multiplier that comes down for the other businesses they use.
Yeah. What I wanted to point out, and thanks, you kind of touched on what I was kind of getting after. So therefore, when we look at logistics and we realize, okay, container ship pulls in, all those containers go all around the county. Let's say a whole bunch of them go to Clackamas County, and they do, right? That's being imported in the county, and it's also being exported back out the county, right? So is that parsed out to where we can actually see what is actually coming from, let's say, agriculture, or what's coming from nurseries, or what's coming from manufacturing? And do we look at that inflow, outflow to say what is actually being originated in Clackamas County versus being imported and exported? Because sometimes I think they cross over, and it creates a gray area where you're not really seeing the fact that, well, but you exported it, but you also imported it as well. I would say export, local exports, outgoing, leaving the county, but not necessarily leaving the country.
Does it look at it on we have to do a deeper dive into the report. I don't believe, it talks about local, and I'm not sure what local is. I mean, in my mind, what you're explaining to me, if you remember that spaghetti map where it talked about like jobs moving from one area to the other and what's coming in and what's coming out, I don't believe it does that level of analysis. But I do believe it talks about, the indirect benefit and what of that is local. And I'm assuming that means in the county, but I don't want to say that to you because I haven't confirmed that, but I believe that to be the case.
Yeah.
But we can take a deeper look into that.
And I think where it gets fuzzy for me is trying to understand what the logistics really do for us. If it's, like, look at Fred Meyer, right?
Yeah.
A lot of stuff comes in, a lot of the retailers comes in overseas, right? It gets brought into Clackamas County, gets distributed back out. How much of that is related to or measured against, let's say, ag or advanced metal manufacturing, being actually created here and then shipped out versus being shipped in and then redistributed back out?
Correct, but they're a major employer in the region, and you look at the fact that they've also done significant investment in Clackamas County. And you look at the amount, and so logistics, in my mind, it just differs from like, do I just have an asphalt path that I'm parking trucks on? Or am I legitimately moving goods and materials and product in and around? And to do that requires more than just that parking lot, so.
I'm done, thank you.
Thank you. Commissioners, we're going to have to move this session along. We were going to have another shot at this in December 11th, but Gary, who's lighting?
Commissioner West.
Okay, before we go to Commissioner West, international trade for a moment is a big deal. And you look at the bubble graph on page either 14 or 11, and you see natural resources. It's up here in the northwest corner by itself. It's so far out, it probably has a nosebleed. And that's food production and timber production and all kind of agriculture. And you talk about inflation. People complain about the price of groceries. We import a lot of our food into Clackamas County. You walk down the aisles of the grocery store. I was in Safeway this week, over the weekend, don't remember. The freezer section was almost empty. And I said, why? Well, we just haven't got our supply in. And a lot of our food, believe it or not, comes from China. Why would we import food from China when we can grow it right here? And I will say the underutilization of our farmland, and I've been saying that since day one. It's important that we feed ourselves, not only for the economic benefit, but for the health benefits as well. And don't talk to me about farmers markets. You're going to sell 6 tomatoes and think you're going to make a living. No, it doesn't happen. Okay? I'm talking real farm production that I used to grow up as a kid with. I'm a 4th-generation farmer. Okay? And in your study, you don't mention the rural reserves, where this happens. Okay, you're looking at urban reserves. That's my only objection to this study. Because Clackamas County, for the most part, you take away Lake Oswego, Westland, Milwaukee, the northern part, the half part of Clackamas County is where you're seeing your greatest growth in Canby, Molalla, Estacada, Happy Valley out to Damascus. All of that, hundreds and thousands of acres, is food production. And until we get really serious in this county about we could feed the entire state of Oregon from Clackamas County. And I've been saying that. So until we really take a good look at our food production, if you want to really tackle international trade, I mean, I think that's something that we need to really start looking at, and it comes from rural reserves and the use of our land to not only grow the products, be able to process them from where they become from. And Dan, you and I have had this discussion ad nauseum. So you just can't look at the medical community, you just can't look at the construction, and this goes into wholesale trade, international trade, the whole thing.
There is a study that we have somewhere that we actually did look at that rural economy. I don't know where it is. I might have it somewhere on my desk, but, and we could ask folks. I think Shelley
We've got it.
had worked on that. Yeah, you know, yeah, we might want to, yeah.
Thank you. Commissioner West?
I didn't want to belabor this too long, since we're going to look at this again. I wonder if our work should also show efforts that we believe should be removed through removing regulations, making the pathway easier for businesses to succeed. Business and industry will find its way to succeed when government gets out of its way is often the thing here. And I don't know how much we actually need to intervene, except that we might want to carve out pathways that actually make it easier for business to grow, but all too often government thinks it has the answer for the free market when the free market will take care of itself. And so I don't know, maybe in our policy discussions, we should also be talking like these regulations are harmful. This is what's causing hospitals to not have a profit, and these regulations in the state locally make it more difficult for them to be successful in a major industry within Clackamas County. I think those are important things for us to principally talk about, is what is the role of government in this space at all? And if anything, probably the best thing we do is just get out the way.
Okay, thank you. Commissioners, I think we've had great discussion on this. There's a motion to be entertained on page 2. I will accept.
I move to direct the staff to establish the scope of work for the industrial site and workforce readiness study and present it to the board on December 11, 2024.
Second.
Commissioner Scholl has moved that to direct staff to establish a scope of work for the industrial site and workforce readiness study and present it to the board on December 11, 2024. Commissioner Schrader has seconded the motion. Any further discussion? And Commissioners, we can take another tact at this in a couple weeks when this comes back. Would the clerk please take the poll?
Commissioner Savis.
Aye.
Commissioner Schrader.
Aye.
Commissioner West.
Aye.
Commissioner Scholl.
Aye.
Madam Chair.
Thank you. Aye, motion passes 5-0. Thank you much for this very good work. I'm going to be reading that more in detail a little bit later.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Commissioners, we have another policy session. I think a 5-minute break is in order, so please be brief and then come back in 5 minutes if you can, please. We will now continue with our policy sessions on November 13, 2024. Gary.
Thank you, Chair. Next policy session is 2024 Providence Plan and 2025 Non-Represented Cost Share Benefits. This is Human Resources, and they will present Evelyn Minor-Lawrence, the Director of Human Resources, Heather Pedersen, the Deputy Director of Human Resources, and Cynthia Kadachi, the Benefits Manager. This is a follow-up to a previous policy session you had. Staff answered all your questions in the staff report. Thank you. So a quick presentation, and then we'll answer the board's questions. Go ahead, please.
Okay. Thank you. Good morning,
Welcome.
Commissioners.
Please introduce yourself.
Evelyn Minor-Lawrence, Director of HR. I have again with me Heather Pedersen, Deputy Director, and Cynthia Kadachi, our Benefits Manager.
Thank you.
Okay. Commissioners, we're here to seek approval on 2 items. The first one is we're seeking your approval on the 2024 Providence Summary Plan descriptions for each of the plans, and we'd like that to move forward for adoption at the future business meeting. The second item that we're seeking your approval on is the existing non-rep cost sharing, which is 95% 5 medical premiums and 100% premiums for the dental, life, and disability plans. So I'll just kind of quickly review those plans before we get into more cost sharing information. So I'll start out with the first is, again, we're seeking approval on the summary plan description changes. And I'll start out first looking at the general county plans, and those general county plans includes the non-rep employees as well as the represented employees. Kaiser Medical, they initiated a 13.7% increase on the general population medical plan. With the plan design changes, the work that our BRC, our Benefits Review Committee, participated in this past year, they were able to negotiate a reduction in that increase from Providence from 13.7% to 9.2%. The BRC voted to approve the following changes, and I'll review those very quickly. So Kaiser, in our previous plan, the deductions for an individual was $250. The increase went from an individual to $400 deductible. For a family, from $500 deductible to $800 deductible. Then there's also an out-of-pocket deduction for our employees as well. For an individual, it goes from $1,000 to $1,750 for individual, and then $2,000 for family to $3,500. POA also had some increases as well. Providence proposed for the POA plan a 13.7% increase. With the work of the BRC for POA, it reduced it to a 9.1% increase. The BRC voted, POA BRC voted to have the Kaiser plan deductible. It was originally at 0 deductible, and it was moved to a $250 increase for individual and $500 increase for a family member. The out-of-pocket expense went from $600, so to an individual now $1,200, and family went from $1,000 to $2,000. The overall, when we look at, there's a chart that you can see the overall increases for each of the plans. So with the general population Providence, we have 928 employees enrolled on that plan. That increase to the county, which is at the 95%, is a 2.40% increase. For our employees, is a 2.4% increase. General County, Kaiser, we have 765 employees enrolled on that plan. For the county expense, that's 9.2, and for the employees is 10.20. POA Providence, we have enrolled 288 employees to an overall increase for the county of 10.40. And for our employees of POA Providence, 0 increase. POA Kaiser, we have 138 employees enrolled in that plan. Overall increase to Clackamas County is 9.10, and to employees is 0. We've also broken it down to provide for you that we also have retirees on these plans as well, so that you can see where how many retirees we have in each of our medical plans. General population, again, I want to reiterate, it includes both our non-rep as well as our represented and now retirees. We have 61 retirees that are carrying that plan. That is a 2.4% increase for Clackamas County and a 2.40 for employees as well. The General County Kaiser, 17 employees, retirees, 17 retirees are enrolled on that plan. Overall increase to Clackamas County is 9.20, to our employees is 9.20. Retirees, POA Providence, currently we have 92 retirees enrolled on that plan, 10.04 to cost to the county, and to retirees is a 10.04 increase for that. POA, Kaiser, retirees, 16 enrolled, 9.10 increase to the county, and a 2.10 increase to our retirees. The other benefits that the county provides to both to our employees, there was no change in the 2025 plans to our group life, accidental and long care, dependent care, short and long-term disability, and flexible spending plan. No change there. Okay. I'll turn it over and have Heather walk through the 2025 non-rep cost-sharing arrangements.
Okay, thank you. So one of the actions that we are requesting this board take is approval of the 2025 non-represented cost-sharing arrangement. The cost sharing for represented employees is defined in the applicable collective bargaining agreements, and for the majority of those, it is a 95-5. So the county covers 95%, the employee covers 5% of premiums. Past practice for the non-represented employees has been that they have an equivalent premium share of 95% for the employee and 5%. 95% for the county and 5% for the employee. And this practice has essentially alleviated any disincentive for employees to promote out of represented membership and into non-represented positions and maintain equity among employees. This increase and in 2025, the average employer contribution for non-represented employees is approximately $1,867 per employee per month, which ends up at about $22,400 annually. And the average contribution for the employee at that 5% is $98 per month, which is just about $1,180 annually. One of the information requests from last time we were here is on page 3. And we had provided information regarding the financial impacts of the county's benefit package from 2024 to 2025. And so what we've done is provided it in a table format that shows it broken down, those costs broken down between the employer cost and the employee cost and the annual totals for both 2024 and 2025. One thing I want to point out is that the prior policy session worksheet, those numbers were the county cost only. What you're looking at now are total budgeted dollars, which do include the employees portion because we have to budget for everything, and then we receive the revenues from the employees and pay that. So that's why those numbers do look a little different from our last worksheet. This is the fully budgeted amounts for 2024 and 2025. So with that, I am finished. Thank you.
Are you finished, Cindy?
Yeah.
Okay. I believe Commissioner West, you're up.
Thank you, Chair. I know I had some concerns last time this was presented before us. A lot of discussions happened since then. And Gary, could you please catch the public up to speed, like where we progressed and where we're at now with the concerns that I had?
Yes, thank you, Commissioner West. So concerns that you and the rest of the board had was really around the Benefits Review Committee, which was a committee created by the Board of County Commissioners 40 years ago in 1981, over 40 years ago, that delegated the responsibility for choosing benefit packages for employees to this committee, not to the Board of County Commissioners. This committee consists of represented and non-represented employees. Since I've heard your feedback from the last session, the immediate changes I'm making with Evelyn's support is to have a new seat on this committee who will be a county commissioner, a non-voting but a member of the committee. I recommend that be Commissioner West, but you can decide who. And I'm going to do a restructuring of the non-represented members of that committee to make sure there are appointed members who have strong financial and budget background and knows the will of the board and myself to help bring that to the table as that committee makes decisions. And then a longer-term solution will be working with the board if you want to restructure the authorities to bring it back to the Board of Commissioners rather than this committee. But that'll take some time. The short-term effects, again, to change some of the non-represented members and to have a county commissioner seat effective immediately.
Okay. Commissioner West?
That's exactly what I wanted to have everybody updated on.
Yeah, I think that is a good start. Thank you very much for that. I appreciate that those changes would be helpful to get a sound economic view of our benefits and really what's needed to be offered subject matter experts in the area. Any other questions or comments from commissioners?
I do have one slightly related one, and that is just getting clarification that these are FTEs and not part-time. Is that correct?
Cynthia, you want to address that?
These are enrolled members.
Okay. So,
So it could include it could include part-time as well. So the numbers that you see, these are employees that are enrolled, and that we do have part-time employees. If they work a certain amount of hours, then they are eligible for benefits. So it could include them both.
okay. And I know, I appreciate the help you gave me about a month or two ago when I had questions about part-time employees versus temporary employees, and what about the long-term, let's just say, rule of measure, a 5-year part-time or temporary employee, do they get all the same benefits? Not necessarily about health per se, but all the benefits, vacation pay and so on. But it seems to me that, and maybe it's semantics to some degree, but we have, some people can only work part-time because they have an ailing family member, for let's just say, though they might be able to work full-time, but they can't because they're caring for another. So my question is, do we treat them the same in the part-time world? And then are there temporary employees that have been temporary for more than 5 years? And I think the answer is yes. So at what point are they really not temporary? Are they not getting the benefits? So it's not a conversation for today, but I did want to broach this, that I am interested in this discussion, and to better understand it, to make sure that our longtime employees that have been here, even though they might be temporary or classified as part-time, that they're receiving, some benefit and recognition that they may be, for purposes of that position or their skill set, they may be temporary permanently, which is a play on words, so I understand that. But to me, they seem, if they're dedicated to the county and they've been here that long and they foresee that they'll be here even longer, I think that they ought to have, and not just these benefits, but the entire package. And you've expressed that a lot of that's available, but not exclusively, if I understand correctly. So anyhow, conversation for another day, but I just wanted to take this opportunity to put that on the table.
Thank you. Commissioners, barring no other discussions, we have some recommendations on page 4. I believe we need to entertain a motion.
There's 2 separate items to vote on, please.
Yep. First of all, we make,
So there's item 1 and item 2. So I move to approve the 2024 Providence summary plan description for each plan and move forward with the formal adoption at a future business meeting.
yes, that would be item 1.
Yes.
Second.
Second.
Commissioner Savas has moved to approve the 2024 Providence summary plan description for each plan and move forward for a formal adoption at a future business meeting. And Commissioner Scholl has seconded that motion. Any further discussion? Seeing none, would the clerk please take the poll?
Commissioner Schrader.
Aye.
Commissioner West.
Aye.
Commissioner Scholl.
Aye.
Commissioner Savas.
Aye.
Madam Chair.
Aye, motion passes 5-0. Thank you very much. Now we have item 2 to consider. Commissioner Savas?
Yeah, item 2, I move to approve the existing non-represented cost share of 95.5% medical premiums and the 100% of the premiums for dental, life, and disability plans.
Second.
Commissioner Savas has moved approval for the existing non-represented cost share 95%, 5% medical premiums, and 100% of the premiums for dental, life, and disability plans. Commissioner Schrader has seconded that motion. Any further discussions? Seeing none, would the clerk please call the poll?
Commissioner West.
Aye.
Commissioner Scholl.
Aye.
Commissioner Schrader.
Aye.
Commissioner Savas.
Aye.
Madam Chair.
Aye, motion passes 5-0. Thank you very much for all your hard work on this, and more to come, I'm sure.
Okay, thank you.
All righty. Gary?
That is the last policy session. You have cleared out the whole day. You are now finished for the day.
Seeing no further business before this commission, we are adjourned. Very good, Commissioners.